Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer into the temple, coming to us from Metalweave Games, the developers of Crucible of Aether, which will be launching on Kickstarter fairly soon. The one and only Jacqueline Jackie Prince.
Hello.
How you doing tonight?
Very, very good. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and enjoying the madness that happens around here. So, I'll start with the humble beginnings, as I often do in this monastery. I'd like you to walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
So, I started getting into role-playing games proper around the time that there was that whole debacle of, is 4th edition comes out, and it was very different from sort of, the way that D&D was going before, and Pathfinder kind of filled the niche, things like that. And I first got into 4th edition. And unfortunately, and I say this kind of being older and wiser from when I sort of bounced off of 4th edition and went right into Pathfinder. And I absolutely fell in love with the whole concept. I loved, especially Pathfinder, which was such a sort of complete system with so many different aspects of both the game world that they had created, but also just the ability to sort of take any possible kind of story and like put it in your own campaign, your own session. I absolutely fell in love with that level of just detail and completeness. From there I was absolutely hooked. It also helped that around the same time I was working in a game shop, so I would spend evenings combing through every book that I did not own at the time and being like, tell me about this thing, and I would just learn so much and get so sort of invested in these systems.
I can certainly get that. So, what's funny about that, since you brought up 4th edition, is, well, for one, I am a massive heretic according to some, because I actually liked 4th edition. I've called it the edition I'm supposed to hate, but I don't because the checks didn't clear. But with Crucible of Aether, was it a case where this was a setting that you had been messing around with in other systems before making your own, or was there a different route?
Very much yes. So Crucible of Aether has been in development for a very long time. I would say casually, it's been in development for a decade, as things sit in Google Docs and so forth, although only very seriously in the past couple years. So if I take you back to, when I was working in that comic store and looking through all of these systems, and being so particularly excited about Pathfinder at the time, I had this idea for the early stages of this industrial fantasy setting, but I wanted it to feel very, very sort of gritty and very real in a lot of the ways that things worked, and saw the rules for firearms in Pathfinder, and noticed that a 12th level fighter could take 3 to 4 shotgun blasts to the face before dying, and said, okay, well, this isn't how I want to do this. So I went to some of the more modular systems, right? I went to GURPS, I went to Savage Worlds, things like that. And I found that I was making so much custom content that I wanted to start from scratch and really fine tune it to really make the experience that I wanted. And that's sort of what happened. And now, an entire decade later, and now we have a fantastic system that is unlike any other game I've ever seen.
So, given it's a very deliberate choice to go with I'm tempted to call it steampunk, but you use the term mystic industrial. because there's not exactly a whole lot of steam in this kind of thing. But regardless, that is a very deliberate choice, and one of the things I'm curious about is some of your major inspirations, the kind of thing that would be the appendix N, you know, whether it be video games, whether it be other RPGs, whether it be books, whether it be film, television, comic books, what have you. What would be some of the things that would fill in the appendix N of Crucible of Aether?
So, it's a lot of things, as you can probably imagine. But it really came from a lot of the sort of aesthetics and kind of small creative works coming out of back when I was much younger, the sort of dark cabaret and early 2000s goth scenes. So you know, a lot of the music for our trailer, we just got the music of one of my sort of inspirations, Unwoman, an amazing cellist that just paints these amazing worlds with her songs, that has this very, as you can probably imagine, very kind of Victorian, but at the same time kind of fantastical you know, mood with her music. And on top of that, other things, because the reason why I'm so deliberate about mystic industrial is that, you know, the world has so many things that aren't just you know, factories and black powder and things like that. There are all kinds of other little bits. So a lot of inspiration from a lot of Warhammer fantasy, in a way that they tried to kind of really go full force into this very particular, like, oppressive mood, and were able to sort of keep that sort of a consistent theme throughout a lot of their stuff, and a lot of the way that one of my biggest inspirations was all of the World of Darkness. I was obsessed, not necessarily that the world feels like World of Darkness, but how they were able to take this absolute fine detailed complete universe and not just write countless bits of lore about it, but immediately simulate it with mechanics. The mechanics and the story in World of Darkness dance with each other in a way that I just really wanted to, and I think we did successfully emulate with Crucible of Aether.
Now, I am curious if anyone's brought up the PC game Arcanum to you.
Oh, I love Arcanum. I love Arcanum.
Arcanum, it's a bit jank, and it's kind of tricky to play on modern hardware without going through a few steps, but the stuff that you can do with it is fascinating, and I get a bit of a kick out of the fact that there is a reason why mages would have to sit in the back of the train.
Yeah. Because I could break it. I remember that.
Or if you've got too much magic, you're not even allowed to get on the train, because those sort of machinery requires things working a certain way all the time. Magic doesn't work like magic is bringing randomness into the situation, so one wrong move and that train could be on the wrong tracks.
Yeah.
Or no tracks at all.
Yeah, no, I played a lot of Arcanum, so you could definitely add that one to the list. I will say Crucible of Aether does kind of deviate from it in plenty of ways, but one of the sort of main things with it is that, like, it isn't as heavily focused on the conflict between sort of magic and technology. Magic, technology, nature, all of these things have very nuanced places within the world, and so you'll find individual stories in which all of these are causing strife or anything within the world of Crucible of Aether.
Yeah. Now, given the large skill system and the core mechanic of being a percentile die, I am curious if you had any experiences with either Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or any game in the basic role-playing family.
Yes. So one of the sort of mechanical inspirations that made me think I need to use a D100 system, because it just made so much sense in my head for, like, the translation of how hard is it to do a thing? What is my chance of succeeding? Oh, it is this exact number. I have a 46. I need to get a 46 or less. Was playing Dark Heresy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because those are the big two when it comes to percentile die games. So those are ones that always get brought up. And of course, when I mention basic role playing, I'm talking, RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, Elric, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or the there's been like 3 different versions of Elric in TTRPG form using that system.
Yeah.
And obviously, Call of Cthulhu's the big entry, but there's still been the presence of others. Now, from what I'm seeing with this, is it a case where you're using a class list or a more archetype based system as opposed to using particular classes?
So it is entirely classless, but there's a lot of nuance in that, and I want to kind of go into that for a little bit because it's I think something I'm particularly proud of. So first of all, character creation is extensive. It is a pseudo life path system in which you come up with sort of the kind of species that your character is, what nation they come from, how they grew up, what is their background, and where they ended up in their life with a career. I'm going to get into careers in a second because I think popular thought might be that these sound like classes. They're not. They're basically just little ability trees that you can get many of, but we'll get to that in a second. But basically, as you pick all of these things and make these choices of what path your character went, what kind of twists and turns they had, you'll get a starting stat list, right? That might have certain advantages in some kinds of skills versus disadvantages in others. However, once you actually start playing, and this is like the huge claim to fame, is your character will absolutely shift and change as the adventure goes on, in a way that might make it so that you could have started off what felt like a stereotypical thief, but say you started either through chance of the kinds of problems you're trying to solve, or maybe you personally are making this decision at the table and are going in a completely different direction, can be focusing on advancing completely other skills simply by utilizing other skills at the table. So you could be like, well, now I'm going to be entirely a diplomat, or I'm going to focus on magic, or I'm going to focus on crafting, and you'll slowly shift and change as those skills advance versus the other ones. And then careers are basically, they look like just your kind of very traditional ability trees, right? It's a series of very particular abilities, all kind of connected, and they are either vocations or factions that exist in the world. So vocations like blacksmith, like ranger, like bounty hunter, like clothier, like physician, or like very particular factions like the augmented Black River warriors, the sort of mystical wolf mothers, and so forth. And if you perform any of these vocations or join any of these factions, you unlock their associated ability tree. So you end up getting access to what is basically a bunch of different abilities based off of every possible faction you've joined or vocation you've pursued. So you end up, if you had a campaign or even just a singular session where, you thought your character was playing I'll use the thief example again, but you had a religious awakening and you ended up interacting with the Temple of Wolf Mothers. By the end of the session, if you join that faction, you'll end up just carrying this access of these very particular magical and healing and diplomatic abilities with you. And so over time, you become a sort of a history of the choices that you've made, both in terms of individual minute actions, as well as these large sort of faction and vocation choices. So that was my long-winded way of saying no, there is no classes.
Yeah. No classes in the linear sense, but definitely archetypes. From what I've seen of the classes that were in that quick start, the vibe I get is definitely akin to the career system, not necessarily in Dark Heresy, but in Warhammer Fantasy. In Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, I get more of that vibe, and I am curious if certain careers have certain skills that they're associated with, since you do have an extensive skill system.
Yeah, so they careers will be associated with a couple of skills in one of two ways. The most common way is they will give you bonuses to those skills. So either one of the abilities might just give you a flat bonus to, say, diplomacy, philosophy, etiquette. It might give you a bonus to one-handed, something like that. Or specific bonuses in specific situations. So, for example, the Lord career has one where you get a bonus to one-handed and firearms checks specifically for use in duels. But the other half of how certain skills are kind of focused in these is you'll have certain on-use abilities that will involve a skill check. Some of the Wolf Mother, for example, gets these sort of divine abilities, so they'll use the divine skill to maybe get a special thing that happens, like the ability to get a sort of a slight glimpse into the future or something like that. But it is really easy. I mean, more or less, it is relatively easy to gain these careers, especially over the course of a singular session or two. So you will end up having not an insane amount, but a collection of careers throughout the game. So you end up being, you never feel particularly locked in to a career or a particular way of playing unless you are absolutely on purpose focusing like that.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly get that. Now, given that, and you kind of hinted at this, but there is a elephant in the room that I have to address because it's broken in and crashed on my couch. Mm-hmm. And that is the way magic is going to work. Since this is one of those things that, depending on implementation, can make or break various games.
Sure.
So is magic use another form of skill use?
It is. There is a variety of skills that you will use to cast magic. Mm-hmm. So magic in this game, first of all, is entirely tied to religion. So because it comes from sort of collective belief that sort of grants powers and sort of pseudo creates gods and so forth. And the actual magical spells are tied to careers. So, like I mentioned earlier, joining the Wolf Mothers, you'll get access to their spells through their career. Now, the way that magic works is each spell is a simple skill check. It's a D100 skill check. At a difficulty based off of the power level of the spell. Like it'll be listed in the spell. For the most part, with obviously some exceptions, you roll a skill check and you will be able to successfully cast that spell. However, if you fail it, right? If you fail this check, listed in each spell is its cooldown. And the cooldown comes in one of two things. It is either a specific amount of time that you need to wait, or you can take a certain amount of mental stress to try it again. And this is simulating your character having a sort of a small bit of doubt and fighting through that, or letting them time to pass for them to sort of get over it. Now, the time to pass can be anything from the next scene to an entire day. It's usually balanced around the actual spell itself. More often than not, it's waiting a single scene. But there are some more powerful or more extreme stuff that will make you wait for a long time, or take a lot of mental stress to be able to just try it again. One thing that I wanted to do with the magic system particularly is I never particularly loved in D&D how little amount of magic you could do, especially in the early stages, and how long you'd have to kind of wait in between doing said magic, right? These spell slots. So I wanted that if you're a competent magic user, you can be casting your general repertoire of spells on a semi-regular basis.
Yeah. Now, I'm perfectly fine with that because, well, for one, I will accept any and every opportunity to bully the Vancian model every chance I get.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons, least of which being that there's no in-universe justification for it.
Yeah.
A lot of that is a consequence of the whole of D&D and subsequent games not putting their foot down regarding what sort of fantasy or what sort of world that they are, but at the same time not fully willing to go setting or genre agnostic, trying to play it both ways. And a game for everyone is a game for no one.
Yeah, agreed.
And whenever I hear people say, "Oh, you can use D&D to run all kinds of fantasy," except that is one of those cases of being technically true but completely misleading. This year I've made the joke of saying that is like saying the Chicago White Sox had a record-breaking season. Technically, They did, but it's a record nobody wants on their resume. Being the biggest loser in almost 60 years. Because that's more or less what happened. They broke the record that was set in 1960 for losses in a season. So,
oh my gosh.
Again, technically record-breaking, but saying that on its own is misleading.
Yeah.
Is the fact that if it's supposed to be for all kinds of fantasy, and for one, why do exotic weapons exist?
Yeah.
And two, the spells, the races, the classes, and so on, all skew towards a Western European fantasy pastiche.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you can't have it both ways. And same. I think that's the reason why I've seen more and more games that are married to their particular setting. Like World of Darkness is meant to be in the Modern Knights. If you want to do something more classical, well, we've got Vampire Dark Ages for that. If you want to do something more bullshit, we have Mage for that.
Yeah.
But with this one, given that I would assume that acquiring new spells is tied to acquiring mastery abilities from careers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given that since it's based on the different religious factions, do each of them have their own little quirks on how they use magic? So it's not the same thing in a different coat of paint each time.
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of my favorite things, right? So I gave you the Wolf Mother example, and I do want to keep starting there because I think it is, a good place. But they're kind of your classic mystical healer. They use the divine skill. There are some weirder spells that they end up getting with some weirder materials. But then you'll completely switch over to the Kindlers, who they worship the Lord of Blacksmiths, and they are actually magical drummers who do all of their spell casting with timpanis, and their spells are all entirely focused on crafting and buffing crafting, and they actually end up using the perform skill because they are doing that, and they fill a completely different niche. So one of the things that I've particularly liked is that the amount of spells that each of these religions have, because it's a game that you're supposed to kind of dip your toes into many things, they will have 6 to 10 spells for each individual kind of faith, and they fill very particular niches. One is very healy, one is very crafty, one is focused on fire and brimstone and getting people to tell the truth. Another one is based off of illusions and illusions created with the violin. Another one is based off of like shadow magic and the controlling of sort of sewer vermin and stuff like that. And it's all these very particular niches that are tied to both the religion at hand and sort of the culture and hierarchy around that religion. So they just feel all very, very different.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. There's been various games that have different classes, archetypes, whatever, have different spells, but when it comes to the act of using them, it's the same. And that kind of undercuts them feeling differently. Like I joked in the past, why does a sorcerer need to memorize spells? Or what?
Yeah.
If especially and to that end, why are they using spells that have preset effects? You would think that their approach would be to would be akin to the bartender who just throws a bunch of stuff into a glass and hope it doesn't explode.
Yeah.
Which, as an aside, I think we need to have more instances of alchemists not being bartenders in all but name.
Yes, I completely agree with this.
Because you've seen some of the crazy ass mixes that people have made in bars. If that's not alchemy, I don't know what is.
No, that's the truest like magical alchemy for sure.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, since you brought up Dark Heresy, that game had something of an extra effort system in the form of fate points, which you could use as a boost, or you could burn them to give yourself an escape button. Within Crucible of Aether, do you have something similar, or is that not the case?
So we don't, but for one very, very particular kind of situation, which is that because our game is so robust in the number of skills and is its design and the way that we teach GMs to design adventures is so sandbox oriented. Mm-hmm. We don't want a sort of get out of jail free card, but instead want you to use this incredible toolbox that you have, sometimes very much thinking outside the box to be able to solve problems, rather than just, oh, the skill I needed to do failed, I guess I'll get a reroll or a free success or something like that. There are abilities and things like that you can get in these careers that will give you rerolls in specific situations. It does happen. But it's never just a collection of kind of free wins. Instead, we want you to run up against a wall and find an insane way around it that before never marked on your character sheet. The time that you thought you had to solve this problem by using deception, and in the end, the thing that leveled up was art.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it definitely seems like you're going with a level-based system. How would skills advance? Because I can kind of see where masteries are developed. So,
going back to that original inspiration, for games, it's very inspired by Morrowind. So you advance skills, and after advancing skills a certain number of ranks, you will get to rank up as a character. You'll get to level up as a character. And leveling up as a character grants you a mastery point to spend on those career trees that I mentioned earlier, as well as the ability to enhance your attributes and things like that.
Yeah, and I do see that you have a bit of fail forward when it comes to XP. I'm glad that you brought up Morrowind when it comes to Elder Scrolls instead of bringing up Skyrim, because everybody brings up Skyrim, even when they're roasting it.
Yeah. No, I am obsessed with Morrowind. I'm playing the new Tamriel Rebuilt that came out recently. The new update. That's how much I'm.
Although I will say this regarding Morrowind, because there's a lot I like with it, except I want whoever designed Cliff Racers and whoever did the sound design for Cliff Racers to be flogged publicly.
Yeah, there's a special place in hell for them, but I do love the game.
Even worse for whoever made that mod where that puts a Hydra effect on the um on the cliff racers.
Yeah, I saw that.
You know, you kill one of them and then two more pop up until your game breaks.
Yeah. That was so good.
I mean, I can't hate it too much because Lord knows I would do the same thing in that situation. Or
Yeah.
worse. Because
yeah, me too.
every GM has some degree of sadist in them, even if they don't want to admit it.
What makes a good GM?
And some degree of masochist because all the stuff that's involved with running a game.
So true.
But I do find it interesting that you're using a AP system when it comes to actions. Now, I can attribute some of that to inspirations, but was keeping the AP system a means of keeping the options robust when it comes to things like combat?
Absolutely. So I when originally creating this game, and obviously, I had Barwin as an inspiration. The sort of as an anti-inspiration, I said I don't want my combat system to be anything like an Elder Scrolls.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, that is a deep problem with that. And so I wanted it to be, yes, very robust. But robust specifically in the light of kind of going back to that original idea of you find yourself at a problem, and I want you to try to solve it in as many. I want you to have the ability to solve it in as many creative ways as possible. You will find that there are plenty of careers that give you kind of specific abilities in combat and so forth, but for the most part, a large majority of the tool set that you have is already available to you right from the beginning of combat. In these various different actions that you can do in the different, with the different action point costs. But you will have abilities to get better at those actions, obviously with individual skills ranking up, but also you getting more points in speed so that you can have more action points, or increasing your strength so you do more damage, or a variety of things. It is entirely about the robustness of choice.
And with that in mind, since I know that there is augmentations that are within the book, I am curious if there is a way to customize weapons and armor to put some extra tweaks on them, or even go with the equivalent of magic weapons.
So there isn't necessarily magic weapons in the world. I consider the universe to be what I call medium fantasy, where it is a world that is not super filled with like I said, most of the spellcasters are people like religious figures and so forth, but to really hit you over the head whenever some really weird stuff goes down, right? Like when you find the part of the world where the strings that hold reality together are broken, or when you find like the ancient eldritch gods that are still involved with stuff. I wanted that. So you don't really get a lot of magic weapons, but there is the ability to customize weapons and to craft weapons, as well as augment your body with these mechanical parts, which is its own sort of subsystem that is similar to the magic system, but with one kind of very key difference in terms of how it works mechanically, where the magic system is about you being able to do stuff, and then if you fail it, getting mental stress. If failing it, you get mental stress. If you want to try it again, augmentation will always have the special kind of power that you get with it always go off no matter what. But succeeding the check means you're fine, and failing a check means that your body is overexerted by these kind of relatively new technology, and you end up getting physical stress, sort of no matter what.
Yeah, I can certainly get that, and I do appreciate that when it comes to combat. You do have the good old wound chart, so people can see how horribly they died. Always a staple ever since the days of Rollmaster. Especially in some of my cases, where at least once, if somebody ends up falling off a cliff or something, I have to play the Wilhelm scream at least once.
Yes.
I don't make the rules for the same reason that one of the rules of fiction is, if at any point you are shot from a high place, you will fall to your death.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Bullets may do you in, but gravity wants blood, and that is not to be denied.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh my god, gravity wants blood.
Although I will admit, in some of my stuff, I and part of the reason I always ask for custom weapons is I like giving my players very overpowered but very unsafe equipment.
Oh, you will love the augmentation system in this game, because it is exactly that. If you are not prepared to use some of the more advanced augmentations, it will mess you up big time.
The metric for what I mean by powerful but unsafe that I often use is the noisy cricket in Men in Black.
Yeah.
You know, a gun that's smaller than most Derringers, which is saying something, fires massive sonic blasts, but every time you fire the thing, you get knocked on your ass 20 yards.
Yep.
That sort of thing, I think I've done some where I did a whole setup with because somebody wanted a boomerang weapon. I was like, all right, I'll give you one. And the approach that I had is if you miss, the boomerang targets whoever hit it, because they come back. So if you fail the check when you throw it, it's going to fly around and either hit a random target or come around and try and hit you.
Oh my god.
And the biggest case in point is a rune trap I would put in some of my early games called the up button.
Oh.
You step on the thing, you go up at about 40 miles an hour for 6 seconds.
I see.
And so, to some, they're like, okay, but does it negate if there's a ceiling? No, it does not care. The spell says you go up. It doesn't matter what's in the way. Which culminated in a dragon stepping on the thing in a cave lined with adamantite and getting crushed to death.
Oh my god.
Because, well, adamantite doesn't budge for anybody, and the spell says you are going up in this direction, whatever is in the way be damned.
Yeah, oh my god, such a good use of that.
Yeah. I get way too many ideas from watching Chuck Jones cartoons.
Love it.
And yes, that's included trying to get away with using hammer space.
Yes.
Or just some. It was just, instead of a hammer, it was a cricket bat. Because because the game was set in Victorian England. So of course I'm going to use a different sport. I know cricket wasn't around at that point yet, but I'm going to make the joke.
Good enough.
Yeah, but with that in mind, since we're dealing with a very robust setup when it comes to the setting and when it comes to characterization, do you, within like a GM section, do you plan on putting in some seeds to help a new GM kind of get the ball rolling? Not necessarily a full module per se, but just a few ideas on where one can start the premise of a adventure.
Absolutely. We actually already have that written within our drafts of the game. But first of all, I want to take a side note. We actually do already have a module, which cool, but I know that's not your question. But yeah, we are very ready to set you up with that. And the way that we end up doing it in terms of theming and places in the world, one, diving into any of the lore in any of the places, whether it goes to the lore for the individual nations or individual careers. It is rife with plot hooks. But if you're not really into digging into the lore right off the bat, you're not sure if you like the system yet, you don't know if you want to commit that hard to any of it, within the GM chapter, we present you with very good sort of types of adventures that are really good within the system, which is pretty robust. We talk about everything from intrigue to mystery to survival to uprising stories, and give examples of all of them and sort of what could be involved, what kinds of factions you might recommend, just to kind of have your first adventure within the worlds that are still fine-tuned to the wants of your group. Whether they're someone who wanted an adventure that's tooth and nail survival stories, one hanging out in sort of the upper class cotillions, having a lot of conversation, or having these kind of heist mysteries and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, what are you shooting for as far as a total page count?
We're looking at approximately a little over 300. We have our layout person and designer, Tim Appleby, is masterful. Not just in what he can do with taking information and making it reasonably presented within a relatively confined space, but also just to take the text that we have and say, hey, you've said this in a way twice, you need to cut this down in half, and we can say it in 2 sentences and it is very clear. And he's just so good with that stuff. That being said, I said 300 plus because it is still a very robust game, but it's a huge world. I'm a firm believer that I want to present as much of this part of the world as possible, and a fully functional game by buying one. I don't want to have people buy a setting book and all of that. But yeah, we're looking at about a little over 300.
Which certainly would make sense. And I will certainly be looking forward to seeing how it develops. Now, I know the Kickstarter isn't launched yet. Do you have a launch date for the Kickstarter you could tell me?
Incredibly soon. It is launching on the 14th, so it is launching in just a little over 9 days, or exactly 9 days, if you would.
And I'm guessing that's going to go for about 30 days?
30 days.
I can certainly get that. And I will look forward to seeing how it develops and what sort of glorious stupidity ends up being done by different tables, because it will happen.
Yes.
But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
Oh, thank you.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Yes.
And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
遅い。凋落が情緒年